Hey guys, it's Mike here, and in this video, I'm going to be doing the final entry in a series of videos which have been to determine who the best main antagonist in the Dragon Ball franchise is. In previous videos, I've discussed Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, the DBZ movies, Dragon Ball GT, and Dragon Ball Super. And now in this video, we're going to take the winners of each of those rounds and place them into a final round. So who is the best main antagonist in the Dragon Ball franchise? Well, in this video, we're going to discuss that. Make sure to subscribe to this channel and enable notifications so you can see all of my content right away when it comes out. Alright guys, so welcome to the final round of the series of videos I've been doing, in which we've been having a tournament of sorts to discuss who is the best main antagonist in the entire Dragon Ball franchise. And as you guys can see here, these are the 5 main antagonists who won their individual polls, and thus made it to this final round. So basically, this poll is going to determine who is the best main antagonist in the entire Dragon Ball franchise, and as you guys can see right now, the overwhelming victor appears to be, once again, the Space Tyrant Frieza. And while I did think that perhaps Frieza would be the winner overall, I didn't necessarily think that he would have such a landslide victory over everyone, although of course it does make sense. So as with the previous videos in the series, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be taking a look at each of these individual main antagonists and discussing their merits as villains, as well as why they could possibly be considered the best of the best in the Dragon Ball franchise. So let's get into this video by starting with King Piccolo / Piccolo Jr., who I included both of as one because essentially they are the same being. Piccolo Jr. is the reincarnation of King Piccolo, even though eventually Piccolo Jr., or just Piccolo, would go on to become a big member of the Z Fighters and a protagonist in the future. But Piccolo is the winner of the Dragon Ball round, beating out everyone else, and the reason why I think Piccolo is a pretty great villain in the Dragon Ball franchise is because he really is that first mythological villain that we're introduced to, who is the evil half of the god or guardian of the earth, Kami, and basically represented a sort of devil. And when he was introduced into the Dragon Ball series, he really raised the stakes by not only killing a number of Goku's friends, but also using the Dragon Balls on himself to bring himself to his youthful level of power, and then destroying the dragon after he was done. So King Piccolo definitely was unique among Dragon Ball villains up until that point, and after he was defeated by Goku, his reincarnation Piccolo Jr. would go on to face him in the 23rd Tenkaichi Budokai, and that ended up being this epic final round, which is one of the most brutal fights we've seen in the Dragon Ball franchise, and really was an awesome showdown between he and Goku for the fate of the Earth. And eventually Goku would do what he did with Vegeta here by sparing Piccolo's life, giving him a senzu bean like he did with Cell, and as we saw, that would go on to pay off in a big way, as not only did it save the Dragon Balls for future use, but it also gave Goku a new ally who would become one of my favorite characters in the franchise. So up next on here is Frieza, who of course, as you guys can see, is the overwhelming victor on this poll, just like he was in the Dragon Ball Z poll of which he won. So I feel like Frieza would have to be the most iconic Dragon Ball villain overall, which is perhaps why he has this position on here. When he was first introduced, he was this unstoppable space tyrant who in his weakest form dominated the entire universe for the most part, and then he only continued to grow more and more powerful, continually dwarfing all of our main characters' power in the process. And it took Goku becoming the legendary transformation of the Saiyans, Super Saiyan, in order to finally overwhelm and defeat Frieza. And really, the battle against Frieza was just such an overwhelming battle that everyone was just pushed to their absolute limits and beyond at that point. And much like King Piccolo, Frieza was an evil villain who was not afraid to wipe out entire planets full of people just because they inconvenienced him or could be a potential threat in the future, which ties into the lore connection between Frieza, Goku, Vegeta, and the entire Saiyan people, which is one of the reasons why, even though Frieza himself as a character might not be like the most fleshed out, he might not be like somebody with the best motivations, you could still consider him a great Dragon Ball Ball villain because of the fact that he has such a built-in connection to everyone around him, and of course, as we saw when they brought him back during the Tournament of Power as a character who actually ended up helping out Goku and friends, you could see that Frieza is a character who can be used in different situations like that, and can maintain that truly evil atmosphere around him, because even though he's helping, he still has those evil motivations of his own. But because of the fact that Frieza's come back so many times at this point, if we include everything non-canon, Frieza's kind of like the Mum-Ra of Dragon Ball, if we're gonna use a Thundercats reference here, where he always gets defeated and says, "I'll be back, Thundercats," or "Goku, and I'll defeat you one day!" And he kind of did, if we count Sorbate's laser, but that's another discussion for another time. Coming up next would have to be Broly, who won the Dragon Ball Z movie villains poll. And of course, Broly is the most popular movie villain, being really loved by the fan base for being this giant Saiyan of legend who beat up Goku and friends, has this hulking transformation, his power overflows and literally flies out from within him, destroying everything in his path, as well as most of the Southern Galaxy. I wouldn't say all of it because the movie takes place there, but people like to ignore that part. You know, Broly definitely does have a cool design to him, it's just that his character itself is really one-dimensional. His motivations are some of the worst in the entire franchise, and he's a character who suffers from being really poorly written by Koyama and those in control of the Dragon Ball movies, which is one of the reasons why when he returns in this new Dragon Ball Super movie, there is a hope that he might be a better villain this time around. But in terms of Broly's appeal to me, I feel like he's probably my least favorite villain on here, even though obviously he is popular among the non-canon villains, although of course, as we're going to see soon, he isn't going to be non-canon anymore. And coming up next is Baby, the winner of the Dragon Ball GT antagonist poll. And as we can see, Baby is coming in last place on here, which I definitely don't agree with, because if we take a look at Baby as a character and as an antagonist, he has some of the best motivations, or perhaps the best motivations of really any villain in the Dragon Ball franchise, because like some of the previous villains on here, Baby does have a strong connection to the lore of Goku and the Saiyans, insofar as Baby is the remnant of the Tuffle people. He was the last-ditch effort in creation to try and defeat the Saiyans and try and get revenge upon them for the fact that they were wiping out all of the Tuffle people. And this was led by Vegeta's father, King Vegeta, as he pretty much took over Planet Plant, wiping out the indigenous population that was there, which were the Tuffles, and then renamed it after himself, Planet Vegeta. But of course, as we saw, Frieza would destroy Planet Vegeta, thus meaning that Baby could not return to claim his planet, that is until he went to the Earth and used the Dragon Balls to wish it back. So, unlike a lot of other villains who would take the Dragon Balls and use them to make themselves like immortal or make themselves more powerful, what Baby's plan is to bring back what was the Tuffle world, and not only bring it back but expand it by making everyone in the universe a Tuffle. And he already pretty much did this with everyone on Earth except for Majin Buu, Oob, Mr. Satan, and Pan. And this is what makes his powers likely the best on this list, because of his ability to take over people and make the heroes fight one another, as well as the fact that he's able to become more powerful with their help, and he's able to push Vegeta to higher levels than he's ever reached before, including what could be a mutated Super Saiyan 3, and then even giving him Golden Ozaru. And of course, Baby was the villain who also pushed Goku to Super Saiyan 4, which is my favorite transformation in the franchise. Although to be honest, Baby wasn't always the best well-written, especially toward the end of the Baby arc, but that's just one of the casualties of his character existing in Dragon Ball GT, because with Dragon Ball GT, we're just lucky to have gotten a character as good as Baby at all. And finally, this leads into the last one on this list, who came in second place, which I'm not too surprised by considering Dragon Ball Super being more recent and this character being so popular among many of the fans, and that is Goku Black, who was the winner of the first poll I did in this series of the Dragon Ball Super main antagonists. And very similar to Piccolo, Goku Black / Zamasu, who are the same being, which is why I included them both together, have a very mythological mythological background. After all, Zamasu is a Kaioshin in training, an evil god of sorts who is a being of creation. However, he switches his role to that of one of destruction. He also has an interesting motivation, and we see Zamasu develop throughout a large portion of the arc as we observe him looking upon the mortals, seeing their evil actions, and then warping that worldview into something where he believes that he needs to wipe out all of the mortals who exist as a mistake of the gods, and then he has to wipe out all of the gods so that not only will they not interfere in his plans, but also so that he, Zamasu, can become the one true all-powerful god in existence. Although I guess he forgot about Zeno along the way, and it's still pretty questionable about how he could have even defeated some of the gods, because it seems like some of the Kaioshins are pretty chummy with characters that are way more powerful than Goku Black ever became. And his character also borrows some aspects from somebody like Garlic Jr., in which he uses the Dragon Balls to make himself immortal. However, when you really get into the details of his character, his origins and some of his actions make very little sense. And his whole idea is basically just fan service. After all, he's an evil Goku, he also just happens to have God Ki, he happens to have his own Super Saiyan Rose transformation that can make him even more marketable, but among Dragon Ball Super villains, I can definitely see why you would say that he was the best. Okay guys, so as with the other videos in the series, before I get into what my answer is on this poll, I want to see what some of yours are, so let's take a look at your comments. Okay, so first up, Frieza, because Cell wasn't an option. Well, like I said in response here, Cell did lose his round, so he wasn't included in this poll, unfortunately. This is the final round, which is made up of the winners of the previous poll in this video series, so even if Cell is somebody I might have wanted to see on this list, he didn't exactly make the cut for this round, as unfortunate as that may be. Frieza, because I couldn't pick Cell, another Frieza because I couldn't pick Cell. He wanted to pick Cell, but Frieza was fantastic as well, so as you guys can see, even though Cell didn't make it onto here, he continues to be incredibly popular among the Dragon Ball fan base. So as we see here, King Piccolo / Piccolo Jr. Piccolo created a real climax and tension to the story because the Dragon Balls were not that powerful. Death was a real deal in that moment. Well, you could wish people back with the Dragon Balls unless they'd already been wished back before, it's just that Piccolo also destroyed the Dragon Balls, which made them not be able to use them until Kami brought them back. So yeah, Frieza against Cell. If it wasn't for Frieza, DBZ would have ended after the Frieza arc. I'm not too sure what that even means. I mean, if Frieza won, it would have ended. It would have been quite an interesting ending, but, you know, I don't think Frieza is the only reason why they continued. I think it's because Toriyama wanted to keep making more Dragon Ball. And probably because, you know, it was making a lot of money. Goku Black / Zamasu. Zamasu gained immortality, and he pretty much wasted the whole universe in Trunks' timeline, that's true. He was about to destroy all timelines until the most powerful in the series came and erased him. So yeah, Zeno erased him. He was a much bigger threat than Frieza, and he accomplished more than him. He had a god complex, and he had a lot of confliction in himself. He was basically an Anakin turned Darth Vader. So yeah, you can argue about the execution of both Anakin becoming Darth Vader and Zamasu becoming Goku Black, but that's a different question. He thinks the reason why people are picking Frieza is because of nostalgia goggles, but at the same time, I think that maybe you can make the case for other villains on here as well, not really doing as well because of that same reason. But that's another discussion. Frieza, because I couldn't pick the Cyberman who blew up Yamcha. That's true, he was a great villain to Yamcha fans. Goku Black, Zamasu. Honestly, it's the androids and Cell that actually defeated the Z Fighters and changed Trunks' history. Okay. Baby, all Frieza did was be an a-hole. He had no backstory, no motive other than I'm evil, and they overused him, which, yeah, you can definitely argue that, especially if we're counting the non-canon. Baby is kind of all the villains listed combined. Goku Black and Zamasu, really enjoyed these guys, especially the fact that they were the same person. As you guys can see, there's tons of people who wanted to pick Cell, but as you guys can see up here in the poll, Cell didn't get the chance to make it, so I guess you could say maybe he was the underdog champion on here. But as we can see here, Frieza is overwhelmingly the popular vote winner, and to be honest, if I'm gonna pick a villain who I think is the best out of all of these, they do have their own individual strengths and weaknesses. For example, King Piccolo was that first truly evil villain. Frieza, you know, the most iconic villain. Broly, the most iconic movie villain who I guess has that real badass, unstoppable, Incredible Hulk appeal. Baby, you could say, is probably the best villain in terms of motivations, in terms of connectivity to our characters. In various other ways, you could say that he puts some of the other villains on here to shame, to be honest. And the same can be said to a lesser degree, in my opinion, for Goku Black, who, even though because of his motivations and because of how he was developed and somewhat how he was executed, I would put him above characters like Broly and maybe Frieza in certain regards, I would say that Baby is still probably a better villain overall. But I'm gonna agree with a lot of the people down in the comments and say that my favorite main antagonist in the Dragon Ball franchise would have to be Cell. However, again, he didn't make this list, so if we're gonna pick one villain who is the best main antagonist, the most iconic, the one that people associate the most with Dragon Ball, in this case, out of the ones that are picked on here, it's gonna have to go to Frieza, because even though you can make an argument that Frieza isn't even the best villain in Dragon Ball Z, and you can make an argument that Baby and Goku Black are better villains overall than he is, in terms of being iconic, in terms of being a character who is most associated with being a villain in Dragon Ball, that's gonna have to go to Frieza, which means that Frieza wins the final round of polls in this tournament of sorts to determine who is the best main antagonist in the Dragon Ball franchise. So let me know your own thoughts down below in the comments. Do you agree with this, or would you pick another villain from this list, or I guess like a lot of other people did, would you pick somebody who wasn't even included? Let me know down below. Also, if you're new to this channel, then make sure to subscribe and enable notifications so that you can see all of my content right away when it comes out. And if you like this video, then make sure to stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Yeah, and you better subscribe, enable those damn notifications.